They laughed as they tossed the roast into the trash. The very meal I had spent hours preparing, seasoning with garlic and lemon, just the way my late wife Maggie once showed me. "No offense, Dad," Daniel said with a smirk, "but we already ordered Japanese." I stood there with the empty platter in my hands, my fingers shaking, not from age but from something colder, something deeper. From the living room came their laughter, rolling on and on, the same laughter that never seems to stop anymore. They didn't notice when I stopped setting the table weeks ago. They didn't care when I stopped sitting with them at dinner. I had become invisible, just another object in the house, quiet, still, and easy to ignore. I carried the platter back into the kitchen, each step dragging heavier than the last. I said nothing then, and I say nothing now. I washed the dish with care, the way Maggie always taught me, using hot water and steady hands. The smell of roasted garlic clung to the air like a memory refusing to fade. I opened the small window above the sink, letting in the dry, hot August breeze. The garden outside was still mine. They hadn't claimed that, not yet. Upstairs a door slammed. One of the boys, maybe Ethan, maybe Mason, 17 and 15, my grandsons. Neither had looked me in the eye for months, their worlds swallowed up by glowing screens and noise-cancelling headphones, drifting into strangers I hardly recognized. I dried my hands on the old dish towel, the one scarred with burns from when Maggie once forgot to turn off the stove. She used to laugh and call them battle scars, little marks of a life well lived. Maggie would have had words for this night. But she's been gone for 5 long years, and now silence speaks for me. The hallway echoed with their voices as I climbed the stairs. I heard Vanessa, my daughter-in-law, mocking my cooking again. Something about depression-era food. Daniel didn't defend me. He never does. Just gave his usual empty chuckle, not laughter, just agreement. My room welcomed me with its stale scent of pipe smoke and dust. The bed was made, as always. It was the only corner of the house that still felt like mine. I sat down on the edge and reached for Maggie's photo tucked in my mirror. Her smile still looked like warmth, like truth. "You wouldn't have let this happen," I whispered. "You would have spoken up." But she wasn't here, and I was tired of talking to pictures. I pulled open the nightstand drawer and took out the envelope. Thick, sealed, untouched since February. Inside was the deed they never asked about, the deed I never offered. "Tomorrow morning, before any of them even wake, I will go. They believe they can treat me like I'm already gone, like I'm nothing more than a shadow in my own home. But they've forgotten the truth. This house is mine, and it always has been." That night I didn't sleep, not because of nerves. That stage of fear had left me years ago. What kept me awake was something deeper, a strange calm I hadn't felt in so long. The kind of stillness that settles right before a storm, or after you've made a choice you know cannot be undone. I sat by the window and watched as the porch light flickered and finally gave out. It had been sputtering for weeks. Daniel always promised he'd fix it, but he never did. When dawn came, I dressed slowly and carefully. Grey slacks, a crisp white shirt, and the navy jacket Maggie always loved to see me in. I combed through what little hair I had left, shaved with the same precision I once did as a young man. Today, I would not fade into the background. Today, I would not be invisible. The house was quiet, still asleep. No creaking footsteps upstairs, no sound of dishes or voices in the kitchen. I walked softly through the hallway, carrying my briefcase, already packed with everything I needed. My papers, my IDs, the keychain, they didn't even know I still had. At the dining room entrance I stopped. The table was buried under greasy bags, empty cartons, and half-finished cups. The platter I had set out so proudly was gone. Maybe they had thrown it away too. Part of me hoped they had. At least then their disrespect would be complete. I left a note on the fridge, short, polite, and final. "Out for the day. Don't wait for me." I knew as I signed those words that it would be the last time I ever left my name in that house. Outside, the air smelled of damp earth and rain on its way. My knees ached as I stepped down to the street, but I didn't stumble. My old Buick waited at the curb, dented but faithful, the last thing I still trusted. I drove past the bakery that once knew my order, past the schoolyard where Daniel had fallen and scraped his knee in third grade. The streets hadn't changed, only the people had. The lawyer's office sat above a closed pharmacy, tucked into an old brick building. I had made this appointment nearly 2 weeks after Maggie's funeral, but never found the strength to keep it. Then Daniel lost another job, and Vanessa said the living room needed redecorating. Daniel had told me, just until we get back on our feet, and so I agreed. I moved in. That was 4 years ago. Inside, the secretary nodded and smiled. "Mr. Henry, Mr. Richard is ready for you." Richard looked older than I remembered, though maybe it was me finally seeing him clearly for the first time. "Good to see you again," he said. "Did you bring the deed?" Without a word, I handed him the thick envelope. He unfolded the papers, scanning quickly before nodding. "Still in your name," he confirmed. "Your wife never added anyone else." "They don't know that," I replied. He raised his brows. "They assume the house belongs to Daniel now," I said quietly. "They believe it's theirs simply because they live there, because I allowed them to." I clasped my hands together. "Assumptions don't equal ownership." Richard gave a slow nod. "So you're ready to transfer, to sell, to take back control?" "I'm ready," I said firmly. "Draw up the notice, make it official, 30 days to leave, and I want it to come directly from you." He leaned back in his chair, studying me carefully. "Are you certain about this?" I held his gaze. They laughed while they threw my food into the trash. That was all the answer I needed. Without another word, he began typing. When I left, I walked the 2 blocks to the bank. I closed the joint account Daniel had convinced me to open for convenience. I started a new account in my own name. I changed the beneficiary on my life insurance. I wasn't leaving any detail to chance. By noon, heavy clouds had gathered. I stood outside the courthouse. The papers in my hands, signed, stamped, and legally binding. They would never see this coming, and perhaps that was the saddest part. For years, I had let them think they were entitled. They forgot I still had teeth, and now I was ready to bear them. I thought back to the first day I moved into Daniel's house. Everyone greeted me with warm smiles. I can still picture it, their welcoming words, the way Vanessa touched my arm and promised, "You'll always have a place here." And I believed her. I wanted to. Maggie had been gone only 6 months, and the silence of my own house was unbearable. So when Daniel said, "Dad, come stay with us, it'll be easier," I packed what I thought I would need. I locked my door behind me, never realizing how much I was leaving behind. Vanessa had made the guest room ready. Fresh sheets, a brand new lamp, a leather chair placed neatly at the foot of the bed. "You'll be comfortable here," she said with a reassuring smile. The boys carried my boxes upstairs, cracking jokes to make the moment feel like a celebration. That night, Daniel opened a bottle of wine, and we all sat together, sharing stories about Maggie. For a short while, I believed grief had pulled my family closer, but comfort has a way of turning sour. The guest room stopped feeling like mine. The lamp vanished within a week. Vanessa claimed she needed it in the living room. Soon after, the chair disappeared too. "The boys need more seating when friends come over." Soon, the small remarks grew sharper. "Do we really need this much butter? The boys like lighter meals. Maybe keep it simple next time." Then one day, Vanessa announced it outright. "I'll handle dinner from now on, Henry. You've done enough. Time for the younger generation to take over." But their meals came from boxes and jars, pasta drowned in bottled sauce, frozen lasagna reheated in the oven, Chinese takeout, greasy cartons piling up 3 nights a week. The kitchen, once filled with the scent of rosemary and garlic, now reeked of oil and preservatives. I asked, just once, if I could at least cook Sunday dinners. "It's tradition," I said. Vanessa's reply was quick, sharp. "Traditions change. Besides, Sundays are our family time, as if I wasn't part of it. The boys no longer lingered after meals. They grabbed their plates and disappeared upstairs, laughter echoing down the hall without me. Once I followed, hoping they might want me around. Ethan's door was open, just a crack. I saw them inside, Mason showing something on his phone, both of them laughing. "Hey boys," I said gently, pushing the door wider. "Mind if I join you?" They froze, the laughter gone instantly. "We're kind of busy, Grandpa," Ethan muttered. "Yeah," Mason added without even looking at me. Private stuff, from their grandfather. The same man who once showed them card tricks, who built their treehouse, who never missed a single birthday until suddenly I became invisible. I nodded, stepped back, closed the door quietly, and never tried again. From then on, my life shrank into the quiet corners. Mornings spent by the window, coffee growing cold in my hands as I watched the neighbors across the street living their lives. Across the street, the Johnsons had their grandchildren over every Sunday. I'd see them sitting together on the porch, the old man telling stories while the little ones leaned in, eyes wide with wonder. I used to watch and wonder what that felt like, to be listened to be wanted. My afternoons were spent folding laundry that wasn't even mine, just to feel like I still had a purpose. Vanessa's designer jeans that cost more than my monthly medicine. Daniel's work shirts he never bothered to hang up himself. The boys' team jerseys, reminders of all the games I was no longer welcome at. "You don't need to come, Dad," Daniel had told me before Ethan's last basketball game. "It'll be crowded, lots of stairs. Better you rest at home." Rest at home, like I was fragile, like I hadn't spent 40 years standing on factory floors, working with my hands until they ached. Evenings were the hardest. The house would come alive with their voices, their laughter, their plans, all of it muffled through the walls, while I sat upstairs in silence. Sometimes I'd even hear my name. Once a friend of Ethan's asked, "Where's Grandpa?" Ethan's reply cut deeper than he knew. "Oh, he keeps to himself. He's kind of, old." Old, as if it were an illness, as if it erased everything I had ever been. It wasn't cruelty, not at first. It was smaller things, little cuts that piled up one by one, like stones slipped into my pockets until I could hardly stand upright. When I mentioned going to see Marcus, my barber of 30 years, Daniel waved it off. "That's downtown, Dad. Too much traffic. There's a chain place nearby, and it's cheaper anyway." Cheaper. As if saving $10 was worth throwing away one of the last ties to my old life. When I bought a simple Timex to replace my old watch, the one that had finally stopped ticking, Vanessa found the receipt. $60. She shook her head. "You can check the time on your phone, Henry." I didn't have a smartphone. I didn't want one. But that didn't matter to her. When I asked about attending Ethan's science fair, where he was presenting a project on electromagnets, Mason chuckled. "Grandpa, you wouldn't get it anyway. It's pretty advanced stuff." Advanced stuff. Me, the man who rewired an entire house by himself, who built radios from scratch with Daniel when he was a boy, who had taught both of those boys how circuits worked when they were small. They thought I didn't notice. They thought age made me blind, deaf, and slow. But I noticed. I noticed every eye roll when I spoke, every sigh when I entered a room, every whispered conversation that cut off the second I walked in. I noticed how they planned their outings as if I didn't exist. "We're going to the movies," Vanessa would announce, already halfway out the door with the boys. "We won't be late." Never once did she ask if I wanted to come along, not even a polite, "Would you like to join us?" It was always assumed that I wouldn't, or that I shouldn't. Holidays changed too. That first Christmas, I tried to keep Maggie's traditions alive. I made her special breakfast casserole, the one she always prepared on Christmas morning. I even hid ornaments for the boys to find, and I sat by the fire ready to read "'Twas the Night Before Christmas," like she always did. Vanessa barely looked up from her phone. "We don't really do all that anymore," she said flatly. "The boys are too old for traditions, too old at 15 and 17. Daniel and I had kept those traditions alive even after Maggie passed. But now I said nothing. My voice had turned into background noise, something they heard but never listened to. One evening as I washed dishes, the one task they still allowed me, I caught my reflection in the dark kitchen window. My own face stared back at me, smaller, dimmer, like a photo left in the sun too long, and it struck me. I hadn't just moved into my son's house. I had slowly given away my life, piece by piece, and they had taken it without hesitation or thanks. I kept telling myself they didn't mean it, that they were just busy, that things would improve. But they didn't. They got worse, slowly but surely, like water heating until it finally boils. Vanessa began using my bathroom without even asking. "The boys are using ours," she'd say casually, walking out with my towel wrapped around her head. Daniel started taking cash from my wallet. "I'll pay you back, Dad," he promised each time, but he never did. After the third time, I began hiding my wallet under my mattress like a child hiding sweets. The boys wandered into my room when I wasn't there. Things would be moved. Sometimes things were missing. My father's old pocket knife vanished from the dresser. When I asked about it, Mason shrugged. "Haven't seen it, Grandpa. You probably misplaced it." Misplaced it as though I was some confused old fool who couldn't keep track of his own belongings. But the worst of all was the laughter. Not laughter with me, but laughter at me. My hearing wasn't what it used to be, but it was sharp enough to catch the jokes when they thought I couldn't hear. "Grandpa's cologne could strip paint," Ethan said once, and they all laughed. Vanessa giggled about how I struggled with the smart TV remote. "Like watching a caveman with technology," she joked. And Mason added, "He asked me what Netflix and chill means," sending them into roars of laughter. And Daniel, my son, the boy I raised, laughed right along with them. My own son, the boy I taught to ride a bike, the one I showed how to throw a baseball, the one I tried to shape into a man, he laughed at me like I was nothing more than a joke, just some character in a sitcom there for their amusement. It happened on a Tuesday night, though the day didn't matter anymore. They all blurred together into one long stretch of loneliness. I was at the sink, rinsing the same coffee cup I'd used that afternoon, the same one from the morning, the same one from yesterday. It was the only dish in that house that still felt like it belonged to me. Then I heard Vanessa's voice carry down the hall, sharp and cutting. She was speaking to Daniel, but she made sure it was loud enough for me to hear. "I swear he makes the whole place reek of old cigarettes and mothballs. Even the boys have noticed. It's embarrassing when friends come over." There was silence for a moment. Then came the sigh I knew too well. Daniel's sigh, the one that meant he agreed, but didn't have the strength to defend me. "He's old, Vanessa. What do you expect?" "I expect him to try harder," she shot back. "Take a real shower, use decent soap, open a window. It's not that difficult." "I'll talk to him," Daniel said, though both of us knew he wouldn't. "Don't bother," she replied. "He won't change. They never do at that age." At that age, as if 72 years of life made me some other species, less than human, I kept my hands under the hot water too long, letting the burn crawl across my skin, using the pain to keep the tears from falling. My hands trembled as I dried the cup, then I set it carefully in the rack. I walked back to my room without a sound. I sat down on the edge of the bed and stared at the comforter at my feet, folded neatly. Maggie had picked it out, navy blue with small golden stars. She said it reminded her of the night we first danced together at the county fair. My head went blank at first, then it filled with every small humiliation I had swallowed in silence. Each one by itself was nothing, but together they had bled me dry. Vanessa wrinkling her nose when I opened a jar of pickles I bought with my own money. Ethan waving his hand dramatically after I used my aftershave, the same scent I had worn for 40 years, the one Maggie loved. Mason on the phone with a friend saying, "Don't come over, the whole house smells like an old person." And Daniel, my son, never defending me. Not once saying, "That's my father you're talking about." Not reminding them that this smell they mocked was the scent of the man who raised him, who worked double shifts to pay for his college, who held his mother's hand when she passed, and then held his too. Every time I told myself it didn't matter. that I was too old to care about little things, that I had lived long enough to let them roll off me. But that night, hearing it spoken so clearly, as if it were a simple truth everyone agreed upon, tore away my last excuse. I wasn't a welcome guest in this house. I wasn't family. I was tolerated, barely, an embarrassment, a burden, a problem they had to manage. Later, my throat dry from holding back words I would never speak, I went downstairs for a glass of water. Vanessa was in the kitchen, rearranging the pantry. My cans of coffee, my one daily comfort, had been shoved to the very back, hidden behind boxes of sugary cereal no grown person should eat, and greasy bags of chips that left stains wherever they sat. "Oh, Henry," she said without looking at me, her voice flat, casual. "I move things around. It's more efficient this way. The things we actually use are in the front now. We. The things we use. Never me. Always them." I nodded, silent. What was there to say? That I had lived in this house longer than she had even known my son? That I had earned the right to keep my coffee where I could reach it without climbing on a stool like a child? That efficiency meant nothing when it erased the last pieces of me? I filled my glass and noticed her watching me from the corner of her eye, as though she feared I'd disturb her perfect order. When I turned to leave, her voice followed me. "Also, Henry, about your bathroom." I stopped, but didn't face her. "Maybe use the fan more often. And those old towels of yours, they're really past their prime. I put new grey ones in there. You can throw the old ones away." My towels, wedding gifts from 1968, worn thin, yes, but always clean. Towels that still held a faint trace of the lavender soap Maggie used. And now she wanted them gone, not because they were ruined, but because they didn't match her color scheme. "I'll think about it," I said quietly, and left before she could answer. That night, lying in bed, I thought about what my life had become. I was a ghost haunting my own existence, present but not living, seen but not noticed. They had taken my home, my habits, my dignity, and now even my smell, my towels, my coffee. I reached into the nightstand drawer and pulled out the envelope, the deed, thick, heavy paper, unquestionable. My name, and only mine, written clearly on it. They could shove me aside, shrink me, laugh at me, and pretend I didn't matter. But they couldn't erase this truth. The house was mine. As I held the paper, I remembered Maggie's words, spoken so many years ago. "Henry, you're too patient. Sometimes patience isn't kindness. Sometimes it looks like permission." For 4 long years, I had been patient, and they mistook that patience as permission to erase me. The supermarket had always been mine, one of the last places where I still felt like myself. I knew every aisle as if they were old friends. I knew where the tomatoes were worth picking, where the butcher would quietly save the best cuts if you asked with respect, where the coffee was cheapest if you bought the store brand but had it ground fresh. Shopping was my way of contributing. It was proof I still mattered, that I could still take care of a family. Even before Maggie passed, grocery shopping had been my duty. She'd write her list in neat, careful handwriting, and I'd carry it out like a mission. Each bag I brought home wasn't just food, it was evidence I could still provide. So when Vanessa handed me her list that Saturday morning, I didn't argue. I put on my coat, the wool one Maggie bought me years ago, the same one Vanessa said made me look like a beggar, and I walked the 6 blocks to the store. The boys had the car, like they always did. Daniel was too busy to drive me. "Get exactly what's on the list," Vanessa told me without looking up from her phone. "Don't improvise, improvise." As if picking out a ripe cantaloupe was some kind of jazz performance. The list was so specific it almost felt like an insult. Whole wheat bread, nature's own brand only, 2% milk, organic, but in the small carton, apples, Honeycrisp, no bruises, exactly 6. I moved slowly down the aisles, my back aching by aisle 3, my knees groaning by aisle 5. But I still did it. I found every item exactly as written, even when the apples cost far too much and the organic milk was just a scam for people with more money than sense. At the checkout, I paid with cash like always. I didn't trust those card machines. The teenage cashier sighed impatiently as I counted my bills. The man in line behind me muttered about old people slowing everything down. I pretended not to hear, but my hands shook as I picked up the bags. The walk home felt longer than usual. The bags cut into my fingers, and I had to stop twice to rest. I sat on a bus bench, watching cars pass by, everyone else rushing through their fast lives, while I struggled to carry groceries 6 blocks. 2 bags, and it nearly broke me. When I finally got back, they were all gathered in the kitchen. Vanessa leaned against the counter, scrolling on her phone. Ethan and Mason sat at the table, eating chips straight from one of the bags I had just carried home, crumbs falling everywhere. Daniel sat with his tablet, lost in whatever he was reading. Not one of them looked up when I walked in. Finally, Vanessa spoke. "I was starting to wonder if you'd gotten lost." I placed the bags on the counter, my arms trembling from the weight. Not one of them moved to help me unpack. "Did you get the right bread?" Vanessa asked, pulling a loaf from the bag. She studied it like it was a piece of evidence. "This is wrong, Henry," I said. "Nature's Own. This is brownberry." "They didn't have Nature's Own," I explained. "This is the same thing, whole wheat, same price." She shook her head, giving me that thin, disappointed smile I had come to know too well. "It's not the same. The boys don't like this brand. The texture's different." Ethan grabbed the loaf, wrinkling his nose. "Yeah, Grandpa, this is the cardboard kind." Mason laughed. "Nobody eats cardboard bread." Daniel finally looked up from his tablet. "Dad, you've got to pay attention. Vanessa makes these lists for a reason. Pay attention." Like I was a child who couldn't follow directions. I looked at the bread. Perfectly good bread. In my day, it would have cost 30 cents. Now it was $4, and somehow still not good enough. Words stacked in my throat, desperate to come out, but I swallowed them down, where they burned in silence. "I'll get the right kind next time," I said softly. "Don't worry about it," Vanessa replied, tossing the loaf aside like trash. "I'll have Daniel pick it up." My walk to the lawyer's office was steady, deliberate. Each step felt like I was taking back a piece of myself. Richard looked surprised to see me so early, but he noticed something in my face that made him set aside everything else. "Mr. Henry," he said, motioning me to sit, "what can I do for you?" I placed the deed on his desk. "I want them out." He glanced at the papers, then back at me. "This is your house. You have every right." "I know my rights," I told him, "and I want to use them. A 30-day notice, legal, proper, official." Richard nodded slowly. "I'll prepare it right away." As he typed, I sat in silence, thinking about the past 4 years, how I had let them strip me down, little by little, until there was almost nothing left. How I had accepted it because I thought the alternative, true solitude, would be worse. But I realized then that I had been alone all along, alone in a house full of people who treated me as a burden, a smell, a problem to be tolerated. "Here," Richard said at last, sliding the documents across his desk. "Once you sign these and they're served, there's no turning back." "There's already no turning back," I replied, and I signed my name with a steady hand. From there I walked straight to the bank. The young woman at the counter greeted me with a bright smile, but it faded as soon as I explained. "I need to remove my son from all my accounts, effective immediately." Her fingers froze on the keyboard. "That's a big step, Mr. Henry." "Are you sure?" "I'm 72 years old," I said. "I've been uncertain about many things in life, but this I am sure about." She nodded and typed quickly, efficiently. Within minutes, Daniel's access to my money was gone. The joint account he had persuaded me to open for emergencies that seemed to appear every other week, was shut down. My Social Security deposits would no longer flow into an account he could touch. "Is there anything else?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "I want to open a safety deposit box." Inside it, I placed the deed and my will, updated right there in the bank's small conference room. I removed Daniel as executor, locked everything away, and slipped the key onto my chain beside the house key they didn't even know I still had. I slipped the key onto my chain, right beside the house key they didn't even know I still carried for every lock. On the walk home, I felt lighter than I had in years. The sun warmed my shoulders, birds called out from the trees, and for the first time in forever, I actually noticed. Mrs. Dorothy was outside tending to her roses. She lifted a hand and waved. "Beautiful day, Henry," she called. "Getting better by the minute," I replied, and for once I meant it. When I stepped back into the house, they were all in the living room, glued to the blaring television, laughing at some show I didn't recognize. I paused in the doorway, unseen as always, watching them. Daniel, my son, who hadn't hugged me since Maggie's funeral. Vanessa, who treated me like a guest that had overstayed his welcome. Ethan and Mason, my grandsons, who had long forgotten the man who taught them how to tie their shoes, ride bikes, and throw a baseball. None of them even turned their heads. I was invisible. I had been for years. I went upstairs to my room and pulled out a yellow legal pad. At the top I wrote, "Things to do after they leave." 1. Repaint the kitchen yellow, the way Maggie always wanted. 2. Bring my chair out of the garage and put it back in the living room. 3. Cook a roast and eat it at the dining room table. 4. Play my music loud as I like. 5. Walk through my house without anyone telling me I smell. 6. Live. The list grew as the day stretched on. Small things, really. Freedoms measured in coffee cups and furniture placement. In the smells of real food cooking, in the quiet dignity of being allowed to simply exist without apology. That night, it was pizza again, always pizza. I sat at the table with them for what I knew would be the last time. They spoke over me, around me, through me, plans for the weekend that didn't include me, jokes that I wouldn't have understood and wouldn't have found funny even if I had. Vanessa wrinkled her nose and complained again about the smell of mothballs, saying it right in front of me like I was both deaf and irrelevant. "Maybe we should get those plug-in air fresheners for the hallway," she said to Daniel. "Good idea," he replied, never once looking at me. And I smiled. I actually smiled because I knew something they didn't. In 30 days, the only smells in this house would be fresh coffee, blooming roses, and the faint trace of Maggie's memory. In 30 days, this house would be mine again. But they didn't deserve 30 days of warning. No, they deserved to feel what I had felt for years, sudden, sharp displacement. That brutal realization that the ground beneath you isn't as steady as you thought. So I waited. 3 more days, 3 more days of silence, of being ignored, dismissed, and laughed at. 3 more days of Vanessa's sighs, Daniel's empty quiet, and the boys' careless cruelty. I gave it 3 more days to be sure that what I was about to do wasn't just justified but necessary. And on that third night, they proved me right again. I had made a roast, a proper meal, a beautiful cut of meat I had saved money for weeks to afford. I seasoned it with rosemary from the garden Maggie once planted, with garlic and lemon just the way she had taught me. I started cooking at noon, basting it carefully every hour. The smell filled the house, carrying with it the memory of what home used to feel like. When dinner time came, I set the table with the good plates, the ones from our wedding that Vanessa had boxed away, but I had quietly rescued. I polished the real silver until it gleamed, and even lit candles. For the first time in years, the dining room looked alive again. "What's all this?" Daniel asked when he walked in, his voice flat, uninterested. "Sunday dinner," I said, "like we used to have." Vanessa came in next. She took one glance at the table and laughed, not kindly but mocking. "Henry, we ordered Chinese, I told you this morning." But she hadn't told me anything. She hadn't spoken to me at all in 2 days, except to complain about the bathroom fan. "The boys don't eat roast," she added. "You know that." I didn't know that. I only knew they had never been given the chance to try it. Ethan walked in, wrinkled his nose at the table, at the roast, at everything. "Smells like death," he said. Mason burst out laughing. Zombie food. Grandpa's trying to raise the dead. Their laughter filled the room. Even Daniel's lips curled into a small smile. I stood there and watched as they dumped the roast into the trash. The entire meal, meat, potatoes, carrots, scraped away like garbage. Vanessa didn't even bother saving leftovers. Hours of my work, weeks of money carefully saved, the last piece of my dignity, all tossed out with the coffee grounds and banana peels. "Order extra egg rolls," Daniel called out as they gathered around their Chinese takeout, "and make sure to get the soup." Not one of them looked at me. I stood in silence, holding the empty platter, the same platter Maggie and I had received as a wedding gift. I stared at my so-called family, laughing at their TV show, eating out of greasy boxes, while the home I had built crumbled around me. I took the platter to the sink, washed it carefully, dried it, and put it away. Then I went upstairs, opened the drawer, and pulled out the eviction notice Richard had prepared. I signed it with a steady hand. Tomorrow, I thought. Tomorrow they will finally know what it feels like to be unwanted, to be pushed aside in the very place they call home. But I didn't do it the next day. No, I waited until Friday. I wanted them relaxed, comfortable, convinced that I was powerless, that I was voiceless, that I was nothing more than a shadow in my own house. And then Friday came, grey, wet, the kind of day that makes your bones ache. That Friday, I dressed with care, the same suit again, freshly pressed. I wanted to look like what I was, a property owner, a man with weight, someone who could not be dismissed. They were all home when I came downstairs. Vanessa worked from the house on Fridays. The boys had only a half day at school. Daniel had taken the day off too, though his mental health day seemed to mean nothing more than lying around watching sports highlights on his phone. I walked into the living room. Vanessa sat behind her laptop. The boys were glued to their video games, and Daniel was sprawled in my old chair, the one they had dragged out of my room months ago, like it no longer belonged to me. I placed the folder on the coffee table, right between the empty soda cans and candy wrappers. "What's that?" Daniel asked without looking up. "Read it," I said. Something in my voice must have been different, because for the first time in months, they all turned their eyes toward me. Daniel picked up the folder, opened it, and as he scanned the pages, I watched the color drain from his face like water swirling down a drain. "Dad," his voice cracked. "What is this?" Vanessa snatched the folder from his hands and read quickly. Her face tightened. "An eviction notice? Are you insane?" "No," I said calmly. "I'm not insane. I'm clearer than I've been in years." The boys froze, their game forgotten, staring at me as if I had suddenly grown a second head. "You can't evict us," Ethan blurted. "This is our house." "No," I corrected him. "This is my house. My name is on the deed, only mine. Your parents are tenants at will, which means they live here because I allow it, and my patience has run out." Vanessa shot to her feet, her laptop clattering to the floor. "This is ridiculous. We're family." "Family," I repeated, tasting the word like something bitter. "Family doesn't throw my food in the trash while I'm standing there. Family doesn't mock me, ignore me, or treat me like furniture that smells bad." "Dad, please," Daniel said, rising now too. "Let's talk about this." "We've had 4 years to talk," I answered. 4 years of silence or worse, laughter. I heard every joke, every comment about how I smell, how I'm useless, how I embarrass you. Well, now you have 30 days. 30 days to find somewhere else to be embarrassed. Mason gave a shaky laugh, but it wasn't real, it was nervous. "You're joking. You have to be joking." I looked him straight in the eye. "Do I look like I'm joking?" And in that moment, he really looked at me. He saw my face. The laughter died in his throat. "Where are we supposed to go?" Vanessa's voice cracked, rising sharp with panic. "That's not my concern," I said evenly. "You should have thought of that before you made me a stranger in my own home." "Your home?" Daniel's voice sharpened, rising with anger. "You gave it to us. You moved in because you couldn't handle being alone. I never gave you anything," I said firmly. "I came here because you asked me to, because you said you needed help after losing your job, because I thought family still meant something, but I never signed over the deed, I never put your name on it. Check the records if you don't believe me." Daniel quickly pulled out his phone, his fingers moving fast across the screen. I watched as the color drained from his face. "It's still in your name," he whispered. "Always has been," I confirmed. Vanessa's voice cracked as she jumped in. But we've been paying the mortgage." "No," I said calmly. "The mortgage was paid off 15 years ago. What you've been paying me is rent. You called it helping with expenses, but it was rent, and cheap rent at that." The silence that followed was perfect. For once they had nothing left to say. I turned toward the stairs, then stopped and looked back. "Oh, and Daniel, I've removed you from my bank account. That emergency fund you've been dipping into? That well has run dry." "Dad," he called after me, but I was already climbing the steps. Behind me, Vanessa's voice rose in sharp accusation. "This is your fault. I told you we should have gotten it in writing." "Shut up, Vanessa," Daniel snapped. "Don't tell me to shut up. Your father is throwing us out." "He's not my father," Ethan muttered quietly. "He's just some old man who lives upstairs." I froze on the landing, my hand gripping the railing. Just some old man. That's all I was to them. I steadied myself, then continued to my room and shut the door. Outside, the rain poured harder, drumming against the windows. Inside, I opened the photo album Maggie had cared for so carefully. Page after page of Daniel's life stared back at me, his baby pictures, his first day of school, his graduation, photos of us as a family. When that word had weight, I stopped at a picture from Daniel's wedding. I stood next to him, hand on his shoulder, both of us smiling, Vanessa beside him, glowing in white. We looked happy then, hopeful. When had it all gone wrong? When had I turned into the enemy, the burden, the embarrassment? A knock at the door pulled me from the memory. "Dad," Daniel's voice, "can I come in?" "It's your house, apparently," I said, bitterness sharp on my tongue. "For another 30 days. The door opened anyway. He stepped inside, looking older than his 42 years. He sat on the edge of my bed, the first time he'd been in my room in months. "Dad," he said quietly, "please think about what you're doing. The boys are in school here. Vanessa's job is here. We can't just uproot everything." "I uprooted everything for you," I reminded him. "I left my home, my life, my memories." "That was different," he muttered. "You wanted to come. I wanted my family," I corrected him. "What I got instead was a cold room and even colder treatment." He started to speak. "We didn't mean," then stopped. His words fell apart. "It wasn't supposed to be like this." "But it is like this," I said, "and it has been for 4 years. 4 years of being treated like I don't matter, like I'm some relic shoved into the attic. 4 years of watching you stand by while your wife and children treated me like I was less than human." "They don't mean it that way, Dad," he protested. I cut him off. "They threw my dinner into the garbage while I stood there, and you laughed." He had no answer for that. "I think you should go," I said quietly. He stood, walked to the door, then turned back. "What about Mum? What would she think about this?" It was a low blow, dragging Maggie into it. I steadied myself. "Your mother," I said carefully, "would be ashamed of the way you've treated me. But more than that, she'd be ashamed of me for allowing it to go on this long." He left then, closing the door behind him. The next 30 days were filled with slammed doors and whispered arguments. I became invisible again, but this time it was different. I was invisible by choice. A ghost haunting them, my very presence a reminder that their time in this house was running out. Vanessa tried anger first. She cornered me in the kitchen, hissing about lawsuits, about elder abuse, about how I would regret this. "Sue me," I replied calmly. "Spend money you don't have on lawyers who will tell you exactly what mine already has. This is my house, and I have every right." Then she switched to tears. Loud, heaving sobs at the dinner table about how I was destroying her children's lives. "Your children," I said evenly, "haven't spoken a kind word to me in 2 years." The boys each played their roles. Ethan tried intimidation, standing too close, using his height, his voice dropping low. "You're making a mistake, old man." "The only mistake I made," I told him without flinching, "was believing you were worth knowing." Mason tried manipulation instead. He suddenly wanted to hear my stories, to act interested in my life. He even brought me coffee in the morning. "Remember when you taught me to fish, Grandpa?" "I remember," I said. "I also remember hearing you tell your friend I smelled like death." The coffee stopped after that. But Daniel was the worst of all because he did nothing. He went to work, came home, and avoided me completely. No conversations, no apologies, just silence. The same silence he had given me for 4 long years. But now it felt different. Now it felt like what it truly was, abandonment. By the third week, they began to pack. Boxes appeared in the hallway, their belongings slowly shifting from every corner of my house into messy stacks near the door. It was almost shocking to see how much they had spread themselves into every space. Vanessa's workout machines that had swallowed half the garage. The boys' endless gaming systems that had overtaken the living room. Daniel's so-called office that had spilled from the spare bedroom into the hallway, the dining room, and anywhere else he felt like claiming. But as the boxes piled up, the house seemed to exhale. Rooms opened, light crept in, the smell of greasy takeout and cold indifference began to fade. It was still empty for now, but that emptiness carried a promise that something better was coming. Even before they left, I started to reclaim what was mine. I moved my coffee maker back to the front of the counter, where it belonged. I carried my reading chair from the garage and placed it back in the living room. I hung Maggie's picture in the hallway, the one Vanessa had once called depressing. "You can't do that yet," Vanessa snapped when she noticed. "You're still sleeping here," I told her calmly, "but this stopped being your home the day you threw my food in the trash." She stormed off, her voice shrill as she raged on the phone to someone, a lawyer, her mother, maybe a friend. I didn't care. Let her scream to whoever would listen. In 10 days, her voice would no longer echo in these walls. With 5 days left, Daniel came to my room. It was late at night, after Vanessa had gone to bed. He looked worn down, older than his years, his shoulders slumped. "Dad," he said softly, "I'm sorry." I waited. "I'm sorry for how we treated you. You're right. We were cruel, thoughtless. We took you for granted." "Yes," I said, "you did. But does it have to end like this? Can't we start over? Try again?" "Where would we even start, Daniel?" I asked. "In that apartment you're renting, the one with 2 bedrooms for 4 people, the one you can barely afford because you've been living here almost rent-free for 4 years. He flinched. You know about the apartment?" "Mrs. Dorothy told me," I said. "She saw you checking out the building her nephew manages. It's not permanent," he muttered. "Just until we can find something better." "That's not my concern," I told him. "Your living situation is no longer my problem." "I'm your son," he said, and for the first time in years I heard true emotion in his voice. "Yes," I said quietly, "you are, and that's what makes it so much worse. A stranger's cruelty I could forgive. But you knew better. Your mother and I raised you better." "People make mistakes, Dad," he whispered. "This wasn't a mistake, Daniel," I said. "This was a choice. Every single day for 4 years, you chose to let your family treat me like I was nothing. And now you'll have to live with the consequences." He didn't answer. He just left the room without another word. The final day arrived bright and clear, one of those September mornings that makes you grateful to still be alive. I woke early, brewed my coffee, and sat in the kitchen as the sun rose. The house felt quiet, but not the heavy silence of being ignored. This was different. This was peace. Silence I had chosen, not silence forced upon me. By noon they were gone. Daniel carried the last box to the car. Vanessa marched the boys out behind him. None of them looked back. No goodbyes, no final words, just the slam of doors and the sound of an engine fading down the street. I stood at the window and watched them drive away. In her garden, Mrs. Dorothy pretended not to notice, but I caught her watching. I waved, and she waved back, giving me a small, sad smile. "You okay, Henry?" she called. "I'm perfect," I answered, and for the first time in years I meant it. That afternoon, I began reclaiming my house. I moved the furniture back to where Maggie and I had placed it 40 years earlier. I opened every window and let the crisp September air rush through, carrying away the last stale traces of their presence. For dinner, I cooked something simple, just an omelette, and ate it at the dining table with a glass of wine. That night, I sat in my chair in the living room, the one they had banished to the garage. I read a book, no TV blaring, no video games buzzing, no Vanessa shouting into her phone, just me, the turning of pages, and the steady tick of the grandfather clock Maggie's parents had given us when we were married. At 10 o'clock, I climbed the stairs, not shuffling, not apologizing for being there, but walking like a man in his own home. I looked at Maggie's picture on the nightstand and whispered, "I did it." I finally stood up for myself, and in the stillness, I could almost hear her voice. "About time, Henry." A month passed, and the house fell into its own rhythm again. Coffee at dawn, reading the paper in the garden, cooking meals that filled the air with the smell of real food. Mrs. Dorothy came over for tea on Tuesdays. Marco, the mailman, started stopping to chat instead of rushing by. I wasn't invisible anymore. I wasn't a burden. I was Henry again. Then, 6 weeks later, the phone rang. Daniel's voice was soft, uncertain. "Dad, it's me." "Hello, Daniel. I was wondering, could we come for Thanksgiving? The boys miss you." The boys who hadn't bothered to call, text, or write. "No," I said simply. "No, just no." "But you're alone," Daniel insisted. "I'm not alone," I told him. "I'm by myself. There's a difference. Alone is what I was when I lived with you." There was a long pause on the... I was pruning them one afternoon when a car pulled up. Daniel stepped out alone. He looked older, grayer, worn down in a way that went deeper than tiredness. "Hello, Dad." "Daniel, the roses look beautiful." "Your mother planted them," I said. "I remember." We stood there, him on the sidewalk, me in the garden, the space between us wide as a canyon. "Can I come in?" he asked. "No." He nodded, like he'd expected that answer. Then he said, "I wanted to tell you something." I waited. "Vanessa and I are getting divorced." I wasn't surprised. When people treat others as disposable, eventually they end up discarding each other too. "I'm sorry to hear that," I told him. And I was. Not for them as they were, but for the people they could have been. "The boys blame me," he admitted. "They say it's my fault we lost the house. My fault you won't talk to us. My fault for everything." "The boys are old enough to know better," I said. "They made their choices just like you did." "They're just kids, Dad." "No," I corrected. "They're young men, old enough to understand respect, old enough to decide how to treat people." He stood there a moment longer, heavy with words he didn't say. Then he turned, got back into his car, and drove away. I returned to my roses. It's been a year now since I put them out, a full circle of seasons in the home I reclaimed. I wake each morning not just grateful for quiet, but for dignity, for the right to exist without apology, for coffee that stays where I set it down, for roses that bloom without shame. Sometimes I wonder about them, whether Daniel remembers the father who taught him to ride a bike, whether the boys remember the grandfather who built them a treehouse with his own hands, whether Vanessa ever realized I was a person, not a problem to manage. But most days, I don't think of them at all. I think of Maggie, of the life we built, of the home we made, of the neighbors who wave when I pass, of friends who visit, of the life I've pieced back together from the ashes of their indifference. Just last week, I made a roast, the same kind I'd made the night they laughed and threw it away. This time, I invited Mrs. Dorothy, her nephew Marco, and his wife. We ate at the dining room table with the good china and polished silver. Everyone asked for seconds. The room was filled with conversation that flowed like wine, and laughter that wasn't cruel or sharp, but shared by all. As Marco's wife helped me clear the dishes, she looked at me and said, "Henry, you look so happy, so at peace." "I am," I told her. "What changed?" she asked. I thought about it for a moment, then smiled. I remembered something. Respect isn't handed out, it's claimed, and I finally claimed mine.